7 Power Platform Governance Rules every SMB needs in place. 7 Power Platform Governance Rules every SMB needs in place. That's what we're tackling today. If you've been wondering about Power Platform Governance, stick around. Let's talk about now, what is Power Platform Governance and why SMBs can and #39 T afford to ignore it.
Power Platform Governance is the set of policies, controls, and processes that determine who can build apps and flows in your Microsoft tenant, what data those apps can access, and how they're deployed and maintained over time. The goal is to make sure that what gets built doesn't create compliance gaps, security exposure, or operational debt. For Power Platform for SMBs, the stakes are higher than in enterprise environments in one specific way: there's no dedicated team watching for problems.
Large organizations have security operations centers that catch rogue applications. Most SMBs catch them during an audit, or after something breaks in a way a customer notices first.
Uncontrolled app sprawl in Microsoft Power Platform is the downstream result of skipping governance. When Power Platform governance best practices for small businesses aren't in place from day one, apps accumulate in the default environment, flows run under personal user accounts, and no one has a complete picture of what's running in the tenant.
Let's talk about moving on to Rule 1, set your environment strategy before anyone builds.
The default Power Platform environment is a single shared workspace where every licensed user in your tenant can create apps and flows.
For early exploration, that's fine. For any business running real operations through Power Platform, it's a liability that compounds with every new unreviewed app. Power Platform environment strategy for SMBs typically uses 3 tiers: development, test, and production. Developers build in isolated dev environments. Apps get reviewed in test before anyone depends on them. Production is locked, with an approval gate before anything deploys.
The default environment ships with no DLP policies, no connector restrictions, and access for every licensed user. Every citizen developer who has never heard the word governance builds there by default. Some are building harmless things.
Some are not, and you won't know until an audit. Now, moving on to Rule 2, enable Power Platform data loss prevention policies immediately. Power Platform data loss prevention policies classify every connector into one of 3 groups: business, non-business, or blocked.
Any flow or app combining a business connector with a non-business connector simply doesn't run. This blocks the most common data exfiltration scenario without requiring IT to monitor individual flows manually. Power Platform data loss prevention policy benchmarks show that tenants applying DLP to all environments within the first 30 days have significantly fewer data-related incidents in year 1 than those applying it retroactively. Start with the highest risk combinations.
Personal email connectors should be non-business so they can't combine with SharePoint, Dataverse, or Dynamics 365. Personal cloud storage should be non-business or blocked for any tenant handling customer or regulated data. Microsoft maintains current guidance on this through the Power Platform DLP policy documentation. The connector list changes with each platform update, so this reference is more reliable than any third-party summary. Now, Rule 3, govern citizen developers without slowing them down. Most organizations land in one of 2 failure modes. Either they restrict Power Platform access so tightly that business users stop using it and find workarounds elsewhere, or they give everyone unrestricted access and deal with the consequences later. Neither holds.
Citizen developer governance that works is built on a permission structure, not a blanket policy.
3 levels cover most SMB scenarios.
Managing citizen developers in small business requires communicating the reason behind each restriction, not just issuing the restriction.
A developer who understands that Gmail connectors are blocked because of a customer data agreement works within that constraint.
One who just gets an unexplained error message finds a workaround. Next up, moving on to Rule 4, build a lightweight Power Platform Center of Excellence. The Power Platform CoE is a governance structure, not just a software toolkit. For enterprises, it's a dedicated team. For SMBs, it's typically 1 or 2 people who own governance, backed by Microsoft's CoE Starter Kit to automate the routine overhead.
Setting up a Power Platform Center of Excellence for SMBs doesn't require new headcount. It requires assigning clear ownership.
Someone needs to own connector classifications, review environment requests, and act on monthly audit reports. Without a named owner, every governance rule here drifts within a year. Microsoft's Power Platform CoE Starter Kit is a free collection of apps, flows, and dashboards that automates an inventory of everything running in your tenant. It shows which apps exist, who built them, when they were last modified, and whether they've had active users in the past 30 days. For Power Platform CoE small business implementations, this replaces several hours of manual auditing each month. Let's talk about now, Rule 5, audit your apps and flows on a fixed schedule. Power Automate governance and compliance for SMBs depends on knowing what's running. The CoE Starter Kit handles automated discovery. A human review determines what should keep running. These are different tasks, and the second doesn't happen automatically. A quarterly audit should check for. That last point is frequently the most urgent finding. When a flow runs under a former employee's credentials, it breaks the moment that account is deprovisioned. An offboarding process that reassigns Power Platform ownership before accounts close prevents silent failures. Our post on 7 Power Automate workflows every SMB should set up first includes an offboarding automation that handles this reassignment as part of the standard offboarding sequence. Now, moving on to Rule 6, how to prevent shadow IT in Microsoft Power Platform. Shadow IT in Power Platform is structurally different from traditional shadow IT. No one is secretly subscribing to a SaaS tool. Business users are building flows and apps with tools they have legitimate access to, connecting systems in ways that bypass security review, and storing data in places IT can't see. The tools are sanctioned. The integrations are not. How to prevent shadow IT with Power Platform comes down to 2 things: visibility into what's being built and a fast, convenient path for doing it the approved way. Shadow IT flourishes when the official process is slower than the workaround. The most common shadow IT scenarios in SMB tenants. Let's talk about Rule 7, configure the Power Platform Admin Center as your control tower. Power Platform Admin Center best practices start with acknowledging that most SMBs deploy Power Platform without reviewing admin settings beyond the initial setup wizard. The Admin Center is where Power Platform governance either gets enforced consistently or erodes quietly, and the highest impact settings take under an hour to configure correctly. In order of governance impact, Power Platform doesn't operate in isolation from the rest of your Microsoft environment. Microsoft 365 governance covers identity, data classification, endpoint management, and security policies. Power Platform governance should connect to all of these rather than run as a separate policy layer. Now, let's talk about conclusion. Power Platform governance for SMBs isn't about adding process for its own sake. It's about protecting the investment already made in Microsoft 365 and giving citizen developers a structure that lets them build quickly without creating problems that slow the organization down later. The 7 rules here work best together. Environment strategy and DLP policies create the technical guardrails, citizen developer governance and the CoE establish the human structure, regular audits keep it honest, shadow IT prevention closes the gaps, and the Admin Center configuration ties everything to your broader Microsoft 365 governance posture. You don't need to implement all 7 in one sprint. But the first 2 should be in place before serious low-code development begins. If your tenant already has apps accumulating without oversight, start with the Admin Center settings and a baseline DLP policy. That combination gives you immediate visibility and stops the most dangerous connector combinations from being possible. The rest of the Microsoft Power Platform governance framework follows from there. The alternative is discovering these gaps during an audit rather than on your own terms, and that's a much more expensive place to start.